that which information medium they should use for the effective communication. In some sort of communication, as I said you earlier, we may require some written proof. In that sort of communication, that personally addressed written communication will be better. Now, as I told you earlier that various communication mediums can be used by the managers. Along with these communication mediums, communication in the organization tends to flow in these certain patterns. Now, these patterns are also important in order to communicate the information. And these patterns are usually termed as communication networks. Communication networks are defined as the pathways along which the information flows in groups and teams and throughout the organization. Now, the type of communication network that exists in the groups depends on the nature of the group, tasks, and the extent to which the group members need to communicate with one another to achieve the group goals. So whether these are the cross-functional teams or the other sort of teams, we can use these communication networks in order to convey the information or in order to have a certain pattern to convey the information. Now, the most important communication networks which can be used by the organizations include wheel network, chain network, circle network, and the combination of all the above three networks, that is the all channel network. Now let's discuss one by one each of these communication networks. One of the communication network which is termed as wheel network. In a wheel network, information flows to and fro from one central member of the group. Other group members do not need to communicate with one another to perform at a high level, so the group can accomplish its goals by directing all the communication to and from the central members. So in this form of network, the information is dispersed from a central person to all the other members of the group. And usually this form of network is used for one-way sort of communication, like circulars. When the different circulars are issued in the organizations, we can use this wheel network so that that information is flowed in the form of circular to all the other parts of the organization or the departments of the organization. So this sort of network is termed as a wheel network. But this wheel network is not very much common in the organizations as far as the groups and the team works are concerned, because in this sort of network, the different members of the network have the rare chances of interaction with each other. And the information is just flowed from one central point to all the others. So the different members cannot interact with each other in the this sort of wheel network. The second communication network is the chain network. In a chain network, members communicate with one another in a predetermined sequence. Chain networks are found in groups with sequential task interdependence, such as in assembly line groups. Chain networks are used to communicate the information in those cases when sequential activities are important. For example, in assembly lines, in the manufacturing concerns, where the different sequential activities are important, we can use this sort of chain network. Now, like the wheel network, chain network is also not very much common in the organizations as far as the teamwork and the groups are concerned, because in this sort of network, again, the interaction among the different members of the network is not possible, and this interaction or the information is just being done in the form of the sequence. So that is again not very much common in the organization as far as the information flow and the communication is concerned. Third network is the circle network. In a circle network, group members communicate with others who are similar to them in experience, beliefs, area of expertise, background, office location, or even where they sit when the group meets. Members of task forces and standing committees, for example, tend to communicate with others who have similar experiences and backgrounds. Now, this when the different meetings are occurred in the organizations, usually what happens in the different meetings, that different departmental managers and the experts and the functional managers and the different top level managers are gathered in the conference room and conduct the meeting. Now that is the example of a circle network. Now, as far as the circle network, the interaction among the members is much more than the wheel network and the other networks we just discussed. In the circle network, the different members can readily communicate with each other and they can exchange the information with each other. So this type of network is relatively more common in the groups as well as in the teams, because the different members of the networks can easily communicate the information and can easily interact with each other for exchange of information. The other one is the all channel network. Now this all channel network is most common in teams. It is characterized by the high levels of communications. Every team member communicates with every other team member, top management teams, whether these are the cross-functional teams, self-management work teams. They can frequently have all the channel networks. Now we can also use the different softwares in order to have these all channel networks. So these type of networks are most common in the organizations, and for the exchange of information among the different members of the organization. Computer software can also be designed for use by the different work groups, which can help maintain the effective communication in the teams. So with this all channel network, it gives team members an efficient way to share the information and efficient way to interact with each other. Now let's discuss some other formal and informal communication networks which are used in the organization for the exchange of information. An organization chart may seem to be a good summary of an organization's communication network, but it may not always be used for the communication. An organization chart summarizes the formal reporting relationships in an organization and the formal path phase along which the communication take place. So if we communicate at the different levels of the organization according to the particular hierarchical level of the organization or the organizational chart, that is usually termed as the formal communication. Now formal path phase of the communication, which is summarized in the organizational chart, is you can see by the lines in this graph. So the main point is we follow the formal positions while communicating the information at the different levels. But however, the communication is also informal and flows around the issues, goals, projects, and ideas instead of moving up and down along with the organizational hierarchy in an orderly fashion. So if the information is not done in an orderly fashion across the different levels of the organizations and not keeping in mind the position, that is termed as informal communication. And this informal communication is indicated by dotted lines, as you can see in this slide. The dotted lines represent the informal communication and the straight lines represent the formal communication. So both of these formal and informal communication take place in the organizations and both are important. But as I told you earlier, now what the trend is in the different modern organizations, they are more inclined towards the informal communication at the different organizational levels. And what happens in these organizations, even the lowest level employee can directly go to the chief executive and the top level management in order to convey the particular information. Now that is not the case with the formal communication, as what happened in most of the government sector organizations. If the lower level employee wants to give the application suppose to the higher level, now how this information will flow, he will give this his application to the upper level, and the upper level give the application to the upper level, and finally through the different channels and the hierarchical levels that application will be reached at the top level. Now this sort of communication is the more formal communication, but in most modern organizations they are more inclined these days towards the informal communication as well, so that the quick flow of information at the different hierarchical levels of the organization may be possible. Now, another type of informal communication is termed as grapevine. Grapevine is referred to an informal communication network along with the unofficial information flows. This unofficial information may be any type of the information which may be flowed among the organizational members. For example, information spread over the grapevine can be about the issues of either a business nature, like uh, takeover by any organization, or it may be the personal nature, like if someone at the top level has divorced his wife, that is also the personal sort of information that may be varied and that may be conveyed at the different levels of the organization. So this sort of informal communication uh, for the unofficial information is termed as grapevine. External networks are also used for the communication of information in addition to participating in the networks within an organization. Now, whatever networks I have discussed in the previous slides, all these are the networks which exist within the organization, but the organizational members can also use the different external networks for the communication of information. In these external networks, managers, professional employees, and those with work-related ties outside their employing organization, and they are often the part of the external network whose members span a variety of the companies. Now, इसका मतलब ये होता है कि जिस तरह एक ट्रेड यूनियंस बन जाती हैं डिफरेंट इंडस्ट्री में, टेलीकम्युनिकेशन की अलग से यूनियन बनी हुई है, या उनकी कोई एक प्लेटफॉर्म बना हुआ है जिसमें डिफरेंट एक्सपर्ट्स आ जाते हैं डिफरेंट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से, उनको एक प्लेटफॉर्म मिल जाता है और उधर वो अपनी इंफॉर्मेशन को शेयर करते हैं. इसी तरीके से फार्मास्यूटिकल कंपनीज का अलग से एक कोई अगर यूनियन बनी हो या ऐसा कोई रिप्रेजेंटेशन चैनल बना हो जिधर आके डिफरेंट लोग उसकी अपनी इंफॉर्मेशन को शेयर करते हैं, उनको हम कहते हैं एक्सटर्नल नेटवर्क्स. एक्सटर्नल नेटवर्क्स भी यूज होते हैं इन दी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन फॉर द शेयरिंग ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन. Now we just discussed the different communication networks. There are some other levels of communication, and we can also term these levels of communication as the organizational communication network as well. For example, one of the communication may be termed as downward communication and the other may be termed as upward communication. Now, downward communication, communication that flows from individuals in the higher levels of the organization's hierarchy to those in the lower levels, that is the downward communication. So whenever the top level of the organization communicate any information to its lower levels, that is termed as downward communication. And the upward communication is the communication that flows information from the individuals at the lower levels of the organizational structure to those at the higher levels. So this is the sort of information which is being communicated from the low level organizations to the hierarchical, to the higher hierarchical levels of the organization. Then other one is the horizontal communication. This is the communication that flows across the functions in an organization. So whenever the communication occurs among the different departments, among the different functions of the organization, or at the same levels of the organization, that is termed as horizontal communication. And the other one is the diagonal communication. This is the communication that cuts across the functions and levels in an organization. So this sort of organization may involve the horizontal sort of communication along with the upward communication and the lowerward and the downward communication. So the combination of this horizontal, upward and downward communication may be termed as diagonal communication. Now, class, as I discussed with you in the start of this lecture, that noise plays a very important role in the communication process. And this noise creates the different sort of barriers which are not good for the effective communication. Now, let's discuss each of these communication barriers which can create the hurdles in the process of communication. Now, the complex factors in the communication process creates the barriers to the effective communication. Individual barriers may include the perceptual biases, as I earlier discussed, which function as noise by affecting how the receiver gathers, organizes, and interprets the information. Similarly, the organizational barriers may be there, which may be maybe barriers to the effective communication, which may include the organizational culture and the structure, status differences, and the time as well. Now, frame of reference is very important, which with respect to the effective communication. The moment you interpret others' point of view from your own angle, you allow your preconceived notions and prejudices to start working to you. Your frame of reference is based on your experiences, exposure, education, personality, and several other elements which are relating to you. So, if you are receiving the message or sending the message according to your own frame of reference, according to your own background or the experience, while ignoring the other's frame of reference, other experience and the background, then this can create the misinformation which is to be communicated. Then judgments are also important. These value judgments are a source of noise when a receiver evaluates the worth of a sender's message before the sender has finished transmitting it. Often such value judgments are based on the receiver's previous experience either with the sender or with the similar types of communication. So if you use some previous experience in judging the information, in interpreting the information, that can be termed and that can be served as the barrier to the effective communication. Then lack of familiarity or credibility can also derail the communication, especially when humor is involved. Similarly, if the sender lacks the credibility or is untrustworthy, the message will not get through, and it will be a sort of noise and uh, barrier in the communication process. Selective listening is also important, which can create the barrier. This occurs when the listener thinks that they have heard the main points of the uh, or have got the the main points of what the speaker wants to say. They filter out what they perceive as being of key importance and then stop listening or become distressed. Now, what happened in the different presentations? We used to listen the important things, and we perceive that the other things are not important. Now, this perception may also create the noise and barrier in the communication process. Similarly, so if the source of credibility, if the other listener to him the information is being conveyed, he is not a credible person, that can also be the sort of barrier in the communication process. So these are some of the noises or barriers in the communication process. Similarly, filtering जो है, filtering का जो process है, that can also be the sort of noise and barrier in the communication process. फिल्टरिंग का मतलब ये होता है कि हम उन्हीं चीज़ों पर ज़्यादा कंसंट्रेशन करते हैं जो हमारे लिए इम्पोर्टेंट होती है और बाकी चीज़ों को हम इग्नोर कर देते हैं. ये जो फिल्ट्रेशन प्रोसेस है, that can also create a barrier and a hurdle in the communication process. Then in group language is the communication. It relates to the communication when it becomes difficult in situations where the people don't understand each other and they cannot understand each other's language. The inability to communicate using a language is known as language barrier to the communication. So whenever this language barrier or in-group language barrier will be there, it will again create barrier for the communication. Then status differences are also important. Uh, when someone try to inform or persuade others, this status difference can play a role. Social status is an indicator of credibility and legitimacy as well, and this affects how seriously others take one communication. So status differences can create a bias against those with the perceived, lower status. So whenever the status differences will be there, that can also be a source of barrier in the communication process. Communication barrier can also exist when the people are under time pressure. This leads to the communication not taking place, and when they do, them being ineffective. Time pressure. Whenever the time pressure is there, it means the people will not listen carefully to the communicator, and that will lead to the noise and disturbance in the communication process. Then information load is also an important point which can create noise and a barrier in the communication process. When people are bogged down with too much information, they are likely to make errors. They may also delay processing or responding to the information or message at least for some time, and delay may become a habit, causing serious communication problems. So it is a communication problem whenever the information load is there, and with that information load, the communication noise may be there in the form of barrier. Now, how managers can overcome these communication barriers, which we have just discussed. There are the different guidelines available to the managers, which can ensure the communication as the effective communication. Now, it is important for the managers to have a careful follow-up whenever the communication occurs between the different parties. If they have the careful follow-up among the different parties, the chances of barriers and the noise will be less in the communication process. Similarly, it should be in the habit of utilizing the feedback. As I told you earlier, that feedback makes any communication process an effective process, and effective communication cannot be completed unless we use the feedback. And feedback is actually important in reaching to the common understanding of the communication between the sender and the receiver. So empathy and the understanding of the messages between the sender and receiver is again important. We will have to repeat the different things which are not clear, so that the right information should be reached to the other party. And most importantly, the information flow should be regulated. There should not be the barriers between the communication process, and the chances of the noise should be less. We should use the appropriate communication media. As I discussed earlier, the different communication media may have the different powers and may have the different characteristics regarding the information richness and the other factors. So we will have to select the appropriate communication media in order to have the right and effective communication. Now, other important things to ensure the effective communication is the effective listening. And I usually said that for a good presenter, you should always be a good listener. If you are not an effective and good listener, you cannot communicate things to the others well, and you cannot get the things communicated to you as well. So for the good communicator, you should be a very good listener, and you should always use the simple language which is being understandable by all. यूजली हम क्या ट्राई करते हैं, ऑफिस में भी हम ये ट्राई करते हैं कि बड़े बड़े मुश्किल वर्ड्स यूज़ कर लेते हैं यूजिंग द लेटर्स एंड दी सॉर्ट ऑफ थिंग्स, but that is not the right way of communication. We should use this simple language so that it can be easily understandable to all, and especially to those who to whom the message is to be conveyed. Then effective timing is very important. As I earlier discussed, that different communication media has a different power as far as the time is concerned. For example, if you want to convey the information immediately, you should use the different sort of communication media, and you if you have the enough time to convey the information, you can use the written sort of communication medium and the other sort of information. So effective timing and the time available for the communication is also another important factor which can help you to to deal with these sort of barriers and noise of communication. Let's discuss some other ways to improve the communication in the organization. Information dissemination programs are also important in improving the communication in the organization. Information dissemination involves making the information available to the decision makers wherever they are located. The employee handbook is probably the most important source of information the HR department can provide and sets the tone for the company's overall employee relations philosophy. There are many other forms of written communication besides the employee handbook that can be used to alert employees to important information. These sort of sources include the different memos and the newsletters. So the organizations can use the different employee handbooks and the other written communication sources like memos, financial statements, newsletters, and bulletin boards for the flow of information. As well as they can also use the audio visual sort of medium for communicating the messages within the organizations. New technologies have made it possible to disseminate the information that goes beyond the printed word. Visual images and audio information are powerful communication tools. Now you see the WhatsApp tool को अगर हम देखें, that is a very important tool, has become the important tool all over the world for communicating the information. Not only the verbal information but also written information as well as the verbal information. You can also send the audio messages to anywhere in the world. So our recent technological advances, teleconferencing, allow the people with busy schedule to participate in the meetings even when they are at the great distance away from the your conference locations and the organizational locations. So they can conduct the meetings electronically, and they can use the different technologies, teleconferencing and these sort of tools to have the meetings and communicating the information with each other. Then employee feedback programs and employee assistant programs can also be used for communication purposes. Employee assistant programs also cope with the personal problems that are interfering with their job performance. These problems may include the different domestic problems and the other problems which are confidential, and confidentiality is an important component of these programs. So these employee assistant programs and the employee feedback programs are also the important sources of communication for the employees within the organizations. Okay, formal and informal communication. I think I have already discussed about this formal and informal communication. Formal communication networks are the networks that are designated by the organizational structure, charts, or other official documents. So if we follow that hierarchical level of the organization in communicating the messages, then that is termed as formal communication. While the informal communication flows outside of the firm's chain of command. So if you don't follow the regular chain of command, that may be termed as informal communication. Now, I also told you that in the modern organizations and in the modern world, this informal communication is now very common in the organizations, and usually the gap between the top level management and the lower level management has been shrinked, and they are more inclined towards the more lean organizations where everyone can convey any sort of message to anyone at any level of the organization. So that the importance of informal communication is much more in these days. Now, information technology and the use of information tools have completely changed the scenario of communication, and the good managers should always use this information technology in order to have the effective communication within the organization and outside the organization. Among these information technology tools and the mediums which can use for the good communication is the internet. Internet is the global system of the computer networks, and that can be used for the exchange of information all over the world. You can use it within the organization and outside the organization, but most importantly, the different managers can use the intranet tool for the exchange of information within the organization. Internet is the company-wide system of the computer networks, and that is usually prioritized for using of communication medium within the organization, and the different departments and the different employees can exchange the information through this intranet. And the plus point is that that information is not flow to the outside the organization. So there is a boundary that you can use this information exchange within the organization. Then there are the group fairs available for the exchange of information. These group fairs are the computer softwares that enables members of the groups and teams to share the information with one another. Now, these group fairs have been so popular all over the world for the exchange of information and effective communication. Like this, WhatsApp is widely used for the exchange of information, and sometimes that is also used for the official exchange of information. In the different organizations, you can easily transmit the different voice messages and the written messages to anyone else in no time. So this in this way, this information technology has entirely changed the scenario of communicating the messages among the different stakeholders. Similarly, collaborative softwares are also used. These are the groupwares that promotes and facilitates collaborative, highly interdependent interactions and provides an electronic meeting site for communication among team members. So these are also widely used by the managers for the exchange of information, to conduct the different video conferencing, so that they can readily exchange the information among themselves. As I told you earlier, that these communication skills are very important for the managers and especially for the HR managers. Let's discuss some of the communication skills which the managers should have. There are the two types of skills I would discuss in this discussion. That is, what skills the managers should have as the senders, and the what skills they should have as the receiver of the information. Now, the first thing is that they should send the clear and complete messages and complete information. Managers need to learn how to send a message that is clear and complete. A message is clear when it is easily understandable and interpretable by the other party, and it is complete when it contains all the information that the sender and receiver need to reach a common understanding. Now, this is the main point, that this should be the common understanding between the sender and the receiver of the messages. As I told you earlier, what we do usually in the official communication, whenever we write the letter or whenever we write the memo, we try to use the complex language and the difficult words in order to have the impact over the others. Now, that is not the right way of communication. We should use the simple words, simple language in writing the letters and memos, so that it can be easily understood by the other party. The other thing is that we should encode the messages in symbols the receiver understands. We should always avoid the different jargons. Now, jargons are the specialized language that the members of an occupation group or organization develop to facilitate communication among themselves. So we should always be avoided to use these jargons when communicating with the people outside the occupation group or organization. नाउ व्हाट हैपन्स कि हम कुछ वर्डिंग ऐसी यूज़ कर लेते हैं जो एक डिपार्टमेंट में हम कम्युनिकेशन के लिए तो यूज़ करते हैं, और वो उस डिपार्टमेंट के लोग तो इजीली अंडरस्टैंड कर लेते हैं। लेकिन अगर हम वही लैंग्वेज यूज़ करते हैं वाइल कम्युनिकेटिंग विद द अदर डिपार्टमेंट्स और आउटसाइड द ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, so that may not be understandable by them. So we should always use the jargons, especially when we are going to communicate with outside the occupational group or organization. In that particular situation, we should always avoid these jargons. Then selecting a media which is appropriate for the message. As I have discussed earlier, that selection of the media is very important, and we should always be careful about the channel and the media for the exchange of information. When relying on the verbal communication, managers can choose from a variety of communication like face-to-face communication, written letters, memos, newsletters, phone conversations, emails, and video conferences and faxes. You know, then when choosing among these media, managers need to take into account the level of information richness. As I have earlier discussed, that there are three important factors which should be considered when selecting the media for the exchange of information. One is the information richness. Different media has a different information richness capacity, as I have discussed earlier. Then time constraints, how much time you have for the communication process. Accordingly, you should. So I was discussing about the selection of the information media, that there are three important factors which should be considered when selecting the media, that is the information richness, time constraints, and the need for the paper. According to the particular factors and keeping in mind the different factors, we should select the selection media for the exchange of information. Then the next important point is we should select the medium of information that the receiver monitors. Another factor which the managers should take into account when selecting a communication media is whether the medium is one that the receiver monitors. Managers differ in the communication media they pay attention to. Many managers simply select the medium that they themselves use the most and are most comfortable with. But doing this case can often lead to the ineffective communication. So we should always use the media which is also being used by the receiver most often. Now, next point is also important, that is we should avoid filtering and information distortion. Now, students, these are two very important points. Uh, First of all, let me define you what is filtering. I have already explained, I think, in the previous slides about filtering. Filtering is withholding part of a message because of the mistaken belief that the receiver does not need or will not want the information. Now, filtering can occur at all the levels in an organization and in both vertical and horizontal communication. Filter messages is usually done by the different line managers when they are exchanging the information to the middle managers, but the middle managers may filter the messages to the top managers. Such filtering is most likely to take place when messages contain bad news or problems that the subordinates are afraid they will be blamed for. Therefore, the managers need to hear bad news and be aware of the problems as soon as they occur, so that they can, take the necessary steps to rectify the problem and limit the damage it may have. Now, what happened with the low level organizations, low level employees, whenever they have the problems, especially related to themselves, or they have some performance inefficiency, तो वो जो इन्फॉर्मेशन है वो पूरी इन्फॉर्मेशन अपने से ऊपर अपने बॉसेस को कन्वे नहीं करते कि उनका बॉस जो है ने उनसे पूछेगा और दे विल टेक द स्ट्रिक्ट एक्शन अगेंस्ट देम। तो वो जो इन्फॉर्मेशन जो फिल्टर कर लेते हैं और जो पूरी तरीके से इन्फॉर्मेशन आगे नहीं पहुंचाते, इसी चीज़ को हम कहते हैं फिल्टरिंग। और इसी को हमें वी शुड अवॉइड दिस फिल्टरिंग वाइल कम्युनिकेटिंग विद इन द ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस। Now, some filtering takes place because of internal competition in the organizations, or because organizational members fear their power and influence will be diminished if others have to access to some of their specialized knowledge. So these are the different situations in which the information is usually filtered, and the different levels of the organization filter the information uh, while communicating the information to the higher levels. By increasing level of trust in an organization and taking the corrective steps to motivate the employees will be good for dealing with this filtering of the information. So we should have this trust among the employees so that they should not filter the information, and these actions, through these actions we can be overcome this filtering sort of problem in the communication process. The other important thing is the information distortion. Information distortion should also be avoided. Information distortion refers to the changes in the meaning of a message as the message passes through a series of senders and receivers. So some information distortion is accidental or intentional, and due to the faulty encoding and decoding or the lack of feedback. And the other information feedback is deliberate or intentional. Senders may alter a message to make themselves or their groups look good and to receive a special treatment. Managers themselves should avoid filtering and distorting information. But how can they can eliminate these barriers to the effective communication throughout the organization? They should need to establish trust throughout the organization. So one of the way to avoid this filtering and information distortion, that they should create the environment of trust throughout the organization. Subordinates who trust their managers believe they will not be blamed for things beyond their control and will be treated fairly. So managers who trust their subordinates give them clear and complete information and do not hold things back. तो ये अगर हम ट्रस्ट की इन्वायरमेंट क्रिएट करेंगे तो वी कैन अवॉइड दिस फिल्टरिंग एंड इंफॉर्मेशन डिस्टोर्शन प्रॉब्लम in the communication process. Include a feedback mechanism in the messages. That is again very important. As I discussed earlier, without the feedback, वो जो आपका two-way communication process है वो complete ही नहीं होता. इस वजह से feedback is essential for the effective communication, and the managers should build a feedback mechanism into the messages they send. They either should include a request for the feedback or indicate when and how they will follow up on the message to make sure it was received and understood. Okay, so therefore the good feedback should always be the part of the good communication process. Then provide the accurate information, and you should ignore the rumors and the unofficial pieces of information. So it is the responsibility of the managers to always give the true information, and they should avoid the rumors. Rumors are the unofficial pieces of information of interest to the organizational members, but with no indefinite, identifiable source. Rumors spread so quickly in the organizations that they concern the topics about the organizational members think are the important, interesting, and amusing. However, this misleading information can lead to the distrust and can lead to the ineffective sort of. We have just discussed the different communication skills which the managers should have as senders. On now, what communication skills they should have as the receivers? The first thing is that they should pay the attention to the communication process. Now, what happens in the organizational settings? Sometimes the managers are so overburdened in the different tasks, in the different roles to be played within the organization, that they do not pay full attention to the communication process. So, for example, if you are discussing something important with your subordinate, and you also take into your mind about the meeting which is to be held tomorrow, now that will be not important, because you will not be able to pay attention to both of these things. Whenever you are communicating with someone, or you are receiving something from the other party, you should pay full attention to it, irrespective of your time, how much you busy are. Then again, you should be a good listener. If you are not good listener, you may not have the good communication skills, and you will be considered as ineffective communicator. So being a good listener is very important. You should completely understand the message when you are going to receive it, and it will be completely understandable unless you will listen it very carefully. Similarly, you will have to be empathetic when receiving the information. Receivers are empathetic when they try to understand how the sender feels and try to interpret a message from the sender's perspective. So you should not only to think about the message from your own perspective, but you should always take into point the other's point of view also. So that is meant by empathetic. Then another important things which the manager should be very careful about, that is understanding the linguistic styles. Now, linguistic styles is a person's characteristic way of speaking. So you should understand the linguistic styles of the different persons. For example, there may be the different linguistic styles within the country, like Punjabis and the Sindhis have the different styles of speaking. They have the different habits while speaking to someone. So you should be careful about that when you have the conversation with these sort of persons. Then cross cultural differences, you should always care about the cultural differences, and similarly gender differences are important. Men have the different traditions of speaking, and the female may have the different traditions. For example, if you are in a meeting and some lady is there, and in the presence of the different men, she may not be feeling easy to give her own point of view. So it is a responsibility of the manager to create a sort of environment so that she can also give her point of view very easily and openly. So these cultural, cross-cultural differences and gender differences are also important as far as the effective communication is concerned. And the effective managers should manage the differences of these linguistic styles. How do you find out about what happens at the work? There are the different tools of communication which can be used in the different organizations. As I have already discussed, the organizations or the managers may use the different newsletters, bulletin boards, and the different sort of one-way communication and the two-way communication tools in order to exchange the information within the organizations. And along with this official information, some gossips and the rumors are also there, and the managers should always be very careful about these rumors and gossips, and they should not convey these rumors and gossips at the as the information, because it may be misleading, and it may be used inaccurately by someone else. Our today's lecture was related to the effective communication, especially for the HRM managers. So let's discuss the interconnection or interlink between this communication and HRM. HRM depends upon the effective communication systems in the organization for its success, because all its functions like staffing, compensating, performance appraisal, training and development require the communication systems for their execution. Basic purposes that are served through the communication systems, which are keeping employees informed, using it as a tool to bring about positive change and to influence the culture. Similarly, bulletin boards, newsletters, gossips, as I discussed earlier, are the different sources that are used to disseminate information in the organizations. So all of these informations and communication process is important as far as the different HRM functions are concerned. It may be important in the recruitment, orientation, compensation, and the other functions as well. So like the other HRM functions, effective communication role is really vital in the compensation process, in the motivation process. Whenever the top level or the managers want to introduce the change, the communication role is really vital in that change process, because in any change management process, it is very vital to communicate the change to the different stakeholders. So unless there is a sort of effective communication which is prevail in the organization, this change management process will not be successful. Similarly, in the health and safety function, in the benefits and the compensation processes, this effective communication process really plays its role, and that leads not only to the employees' performance but also to the overall organizational viability and performance. So this information communication process is really, really important for keeping the employees informed, and it is a tool to bring about the positive change within the organization, and it is very helpful in creating the culture of shared information and the common understanding of the information and communication within the organization. Now, the important point here to understand is it is not only important for the managers to be the good communicator, but it is also important for all the employees and the subordinates to really understand the process of communication, and they should always be a good communicator. And it is the responsibility of the managers actually to guide and train the different employees regarding this common understanding of the communication process, and they should always keep in mind that employee is the only informational central source. So unless they have a sort of comfortable environment, or they provide the training to the employees, they cannot create a sort of good communication environment within the organization. So employees should be committed, and they should provide the security and proper direction, and the training should be there for the employees so that they can understand and can have the shared meaning of the communication. Similarly, the employers and the top management should be committed, and they should always ensure the committed workforce, and during the all HRM related functions, they should ensure the good communication process. As I discussed earlier, that communication process is almost necessary for all the HRM functions. So it is very much important to educate, inform, and guide the employees about the importance of the communication process and the better and the common understanding of the information. So what the organizations and the managers do, employees should be provided with the employee handbook, which serves many purposes, like it helps employees learn about the company at their own pace. Then it provides references regarding policies, rules, and benefits, so that all the employees are readily available about all the policies and rules of the organizations. Then this employee handbook provides the references regarding the policies, rules, and benefits, as I said. Then it ensures the HRM policies will be consistently applied. Uh, Through the provision of that employee book, it will be ensured within the organization that HRM policies can be consistently applied. Then it creates sense of security and commitment for the employees. It provides information to recruits. It may be interpreted as implied contract also. It should be updated continually. But the important thing is that these purposes can be achieved only if the employee's handbook is well organized. So it is important for the managers that this employee handbook should be provided to all the employees within the organization. It should be well organized. It should be clearly written, and it should meet all the legal requirements. Employee handbook mainly includes the information about the employee and the employer. It provides information regarding the job description for the employer. It provides information about the rules, regulations of the organization, and the different compensation benefits and the other related HRM functions also. So all the related information should be provided to the employees in the form of these employee handbooks. So employee handbook should be provided to all the employees by the managers, and it should be well organized, clearly written, and it should meet the as well. It This employee book should have the introductory comments and what the employees should know about everything. Should be included in that employee book. What can be the employee benefits of the employees, that should be included in it. Then your responsibilities and safety procedures should be included in the employee handbook. Then how to grade each other, how to grade the bosses, and how to grade the subordinates. The guideline should be there. How to welcome someone and some guests, that should be included in the employee handbook. What are the different valuables to the company, and tone setting, cultural statement should be there. Then performance parameters which are required by the organization should be communicated in the form of that employee handbook. Then what role each employee should play, and what are the role expectations, that should also be explained in this employee handbook. It should also contain the different rules and policies, attendance related matters, working hours, lunch hours, layoff practices, performance appraisal issues. So you see that how these HRM related rules, functions should be included in the employee handbook for the understanding. And through this communication, that HRM function will be more effective actually. Different safety related measures should be communicated to the employees. What is the personal conduct required by the organization, reporting incidents and different accidents, how these accidents will be reported, that should be there. Compliance requirements should also be included in the guideline to be provided to them. So let's summarize all of this discussion, and that is what sort of communication methods can be used to communicate all this sort of information. We can use the employee handbooks, as I just explained that employee handbook is a very important source of communication to the employees about the different HRM related matters. We can use the bulletin boards, company newsletters, company wise meetings, digital media. So all these are the different communication methods which can be used by the managers within the organization. I've already explained each of these methods in detail. Now, employees who are not on site within the organization, we can use the other methods. Facsimile machines like faxes can be used to convey the information. Emails, internet as well as the phone can be used to convey the information to the employees who are not lying within the organization or who are outside the organization. So HRM communication programs that should always be there within the organizational setting, and there should always be a good link between the effective communication and the HRM functions. And again, I would say that good effective communication skills are more important for the human resource managers, and it plays a vital role in all of the HRM functions, because it keeps employees informed, it conveys organization concern for the employees, it builds trust and openness within the organization, and it monitor employees concerns. So that is all about the lecture. We have discussed in detail about the different effective communication concerns and how it is related to the HRM functions, what are the different communication methods, and how we can use these methods to ensure the effective communication within the organization. Now, there is a quiz. You'll have to submit it within 1 hour after the end of this lecture. Now, this quiz is about two important factors, that is filtering information and distorting information. As I discussed in the lecture, that most of the employees, especially the subordinates, use to filter and distort the information in order to hide the different mistakes and the performance inefficiencies. Now, what you'll have to do, just briefly explain the possible reasons of such filtration and distortion, and you'll also have to advise the different measures and steps which can be taken by the managers to eliminate such information and distortion of information. Okay, class, that is all for today. Thank you very much. Allah Hafiz.